Once you stop treating ESG as a cost, a more precise question appears. What are businesses actually buying when they invest in it? Because it isn't morality, and it isn't reputation in the shallow branding sense. What organizations are really acquiring is insulation. Start with regulation. ESG doesn't stop rules from changing, and it doesn't make scrutiny disappear. But what it does do is reduce the shock when those pressures arrive. Businesses with embedded governance don't need emergency rewrites, rushed policies, or defensive restructures. They absorb change with far less disruption because alignment already exists. That's regulatory insulation. Then there's reputation, but again, not image, defense. Reputation works like stored credibility. When something goes wrong, and something eventually always does, organizations with credible governance get time. They get space to respond. They're treated as competent rather than suspect. Organizations without that buffer lose narrative control almost immediately. This is why ESG behaves differently to most investments. It doesn't generate upside in a clean, visible way. It reduces volatility. It lowers the chance that risk suddenly transfers onto the balance sheet through fines, contract losses, activist pressure, or forced operational pauses. And it protects continuity when pressures come not just from regulators, but from employees, partners, investors, and the public. That last part matters. Without ESG governance, risk doesn't disappear. It just moves. It gets transferred from systems into crises, from planning into response, from prevention into damage control, usually all at once and usually at the worst possible moment. Now, ESG doesn't eliminate risk. That's not the promise. But what it does is change how risk moves through the organization, how concentrated it becomes, and how quickly it escalates, and how much control leadership retains when it does. Exactly what that asset really is, whether you call it trust, insulation, resilience, or optionality, deserves its own deeper examination. That's a later conversation. For now, the frame is enough. Businesses aren't buying virtue. They're buying time, credibility, and continuity under pressure. And until that's understood as the asset, ESG will always feel vague, underwhelming, or unjustified. Not because it lacks value, but because it's being viewed through the wrong lens. Check out my new YouTube video linked below. The episode isn't about reporting. It isn't about incentives or behavior. It's about getting the frame right. Once you get that right, everything else will follow.